Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people across the state of Mississippi who are working so hard in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. Listen, if you missed my conversation with Andy Taggart yesterday, I really want to encourage you to go take a listen. Andy was the chief of staff for Governor Kirk Fordyce. He's contributed in so many different ways. He actually lives on the Mississippi coast now and is a lawyer over in Jackson County. And he's just a good guy. We're going to have him back. There's a lot to talk about with Andy as we reflect about the political scene, not just in Mississippi, but in the U.S. today. I also want to mention, you may have seen the story, the WLX story entitled "Truth Behind the Menus: Study Finds Widespread Mislabeled Shrimp in Coastal Mississippi Restaurants." It's obviously incredibly disturbing to see that we continue to find where fraud is occurring in coast restaurants. You know, you would have thought after the quality seafood and Mary Mahoney's issue that legislators would have come out of the woodwork and did like Alabama did. Alabama, in direct reaction to the Mahoney's case, passed a law in Alabama to really strongly say and to make it illegal not to label seafood correctly. And I had someone from Alabama come on my show, and we talked about it. So here we are. We didn't act. All this new information is coming out. And when you go to travel sites, people are going to talk about this. And we cannot put our heads in the sand. We cannot say it's not happening. We cannot hope that it goes away. The digital world that we live in today make it impossible for us to say this will go away. We can just sit quietly and hope this goes away. We need leadership. We need leaders in the seafood industry. We need leaders in the tourism industry and the business community. We need the coast legislators to all come to the forefront here and say we're going to pass a law similar to what Alabama did and move the ball forward and say that, you know, obviously we need something to be able to post now when people talk about the fraud that is existing in coastal Mississippi around our seafood. We got to be smart about this, and we got to be aggressive. And I'm really surprised we haven't already acted. We're going to talk more about this next week, believe me. But if you haven't seen the story, you can go to the Ricky Matthews Show Facebook page to look more. And friends of mine on my personal Facebook page, you can go as well and read the comments. People are coming out of the woodwork. I've heard from seafood wholesalers. They're coming out of the woodwork. They can't speak out publicly for a host of reasons, but they're letting me know what's going on behind the scenes. And, man, I'm telling you, it's not good. We got to get on top of this. Okay, now let's shift gears and move over to my friend Jeff Duncan from NOLA.com and the Times Picayune. And, Jeff, I'm so disappointed. I'm disappointed they lost against the Rams. I'm disappointed. You and I said Taysom Hill and all his injuries, it's a miracle he hasn't had a serious injury. Now he's had a serious injury. It's sad, man. And we'll come to your column here in just a second, but you ripped the Band-Aid off, and you should have. But just kind of looking back on this game, if they had won, it would have been notable, wouldn't it have?
Yeah, it was a disappointing day in a number of ways. You mentioned the Taysom Hill injury. That was tough to watch. That was a tough injury. For Taysom, it's very disappointing. He was having a really good year, a breakout year. I was going to start pushing for him as a Pro Bowler. I felt like, the year he was having, he certainly deserved a spot. And I think that was just kind of insult to injury, losing the game, losing your star player, one of the most popular players on the team. And the way the Saints lost it, where they drove down, had a chance to win it again, it was all too familiar, I think, for fans. The team is 1-4 in one-score games. And sometimes that comes down, Ricky, just to confidence. I don't know if they truly believe they can win those games right now, and it showed up down the stretch of that game on Sunday. And it's a loss that's going to really be costly now. They had a chance to really pull, I think, into contention in the NFC South because no one seems like they want to win the division. It's the leader right now is 6-6, the Bucs and Falcons. So there's a real opportunity squandered in that game.
Yeah, you mentioned it was hard to watch the injury. People could say that Taysom is in his 30s and it was inevitable that he'd get hurt, but I don't care if you were 19 years old. under that situation, you would have also torn your ACL. The way it got caught between those players and bound backwards, there was nothing he could do to stop it. Just one of those freak injuries, and that's part of playing football.
Yeah, the timing was just as soon as he planted, that's when the collision happened, and it's just sheer physics. Something's got to give, and it was his knee, and you could see it right away. I mean, players were signaling for the sideline. I mean, they know they're on the field. They see it. You could see it from the Rams sideline. I mean, the Rams coaches and medical people ran on the field. We had a photo by David Grunfeld. It was amazing of the Rams receivers coach holding Taysom Hill's hand as he lay on the ground. It was a very poignant shot. But I think that resonated throughout the stadium. And that moment when Taysom was being carted off and the fans were chanting, Taysom, 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 and he raised his hand up, that was a powerful moment that if he does not come back, and I think it's way too early to speculate, it's going to be up to him. But if he doesn't, that'll be one we'll always remember.
Listen, Jeff, you mentioned David Grunfeld. People don't know who we're talking about, but this is an incredible photographer that has been with the Times Picayune and all.com for many, many years. And this day of cell phone photography and all of that, the days of having people like David Grunfeld on the Saints sideline capturing that image, those days are numbered. We're so lucky to have the ability to really tap into his, just Pulitzer Prize winning ability to capture the scene. I mean, this guy's amazing, isn't he?
Yeah, he's one of the best in the business, and our whole team is really talented, as you know. I mean, the whole photo team has always been, I think, the strength of the Times Picayune editorial staff. I mean, every one of them is talented, and we have an army of them at every game, and they're spanned out at every angle. It's very, very few things are going to happen in a Saints game that we're not going to have images of. And you're right. I think as long as we have that photo staff, our pages the next day in the Times Picayune are going to be illustrated and on NOLA.com with their work, because David Grunfeld is amazing talent.
One of the best in the industry, one of the best, and what a poignant picture, as you pointed out. So we are where we are, and your role as a columnist, one of certainly the leading columnists in the New Orleans region, one of the best in the country. Your goal is not to, you've referred to yourself many times on this show over the long period, over years, as Debbie Downer. But your goal is not to get all hyped up. Your goal is to call it like you see it. And you finally did that in a column after the Rams game. Why don't you share sort of the essence of the column?
Well, I'm basically just trying to point out the reality of the situation. I mean, this season is basically over. I think the Saints' postseason chances now are 1%. It would take a miracle for them to make the postseason. And I think it's time to turn the page on the season and start looking ahead at the changes and talking to people in the building, talking to people outside the building. They expect significant changes to happen on Airline Drive. And my point was, if you think it was just Dennis Allen, the head coach, that's the problem, that's delusional. You're fooling yourself. They're going to have to make some widespread changes. And what I mean by that, Ricky, is not just to the coaching staff, but I think the roster is going to have to be overhauled. It's gotten a little old in areas. We've talked about that. So they're going to have to make some significant changes with some big name players that people have followed for a long time, but they may not be back. And then I think they're going to have to look hard at the medical team, the training, strength and conditioning program. It's just not working. For whatever reason, the program has not worked. I think that's going to have to take a lot of scrutiny. And then I think the front office, some of the decisions in roster management, some of those things are going to have to be looked at. This is going to be a difficult offseason for Gail Benson, Mickey Loomis, Dennis Lauscha, the hierarchy on Airline Drive. And I think the city of New Orleans, fan base all over the Gulf South deserve that. They've been very patient now. What are we going in year? This is the fourth year of not making the playoffs. This expectations changed when Sean Payton and Drew Brees came here. They expect to make the playoffs, especially in the division that's not very competitive. I mean, it's not like they're in the NFC North with the Lions and the Packers, and the Vikings. I mean, this was ripe for the taking. And the other organizations have gone through major transitions and have kind of fallen behind the Saints and now passed them. And I think I think this is going to have to be a big offseason, and I think it's going to be a one with a lot of changes.
You know, Jeff, a little bit of salt in the wound, too, is Sean Payton going to Denver, which that was inevitable that he was going to leave the Saints. He needed a change of pace. But him going to Denver, which in preseason analysis of his roster was not one of the worst rosters. At least that's what was written about it. And you went up there and you saw for yourself. He told you that he believed Bo Nix was going to be his guy. And here they are, 8 wins. Excuse me. Every now and then that happens in radio. But when we come back on the other side, that makes it even more challenging and a little bit of salt in the wound. We'll talk about that angle and then specifically talk about, the salary cap issues that are gigantic. That's one of the reasons why we got to say goodbye to some big names. But we'll see you more about that with Jeff Duncan when we get on the other side. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank studio. I almost lost my voice going into that last break. I'm actually lucky when you think about it because, you have to have a voice when you do radio. And, rarely do I lose mine. So I'm kind of lucky. Also, I'm reminded looking at my buddy Kyle Curley that I'm so lucky to have him by my side. Almost didn't come to this show with Wi-Fi today, so we were going to have to do some kind of a backup plan, but Kyle was always ready to do that. Hey, getting back to Jeff Duncan from the NOLA.com and the Times Picayune, we'll come back to the point that I was making before we went to break about Sean Payton, the time that Jeff actually spent up in Denver, and Bo Nix's not resurgence, but his building as a good NFL quarterback, and what Sean Payton's been able to do, and how that's a little bit of salt in the wound to the Saints' current situation. Hey, but Jeff, before we go any further, I just wanted to make sure we got this and didn't lose sight of it. The NFL was in town this week, and you had an interesting opportunity to see what some of their plans are. What did you see?
Yeah, so Peter O'Reilly is basically the Super Bowl czar for the NFL. He's the vice president of special events. Technically, what he does, he runs all their big events like the draft, the Super Bowl, the combine. And his whole staff, they've been here for well over a week. They basically set up shop in a hotel downtown on Canal Street. There must have been 50, 60 NFL people there, so
wow.
They're getting ready for the NFL, for the Super Bowl. And they had a meeting with the local media and really kind of gave us a little glimpse at what some of the week's going to look like leading up to the big game, and it's going to be very cool. I think fans are going to love this Super Bowl. They're leaning heavily into kind of the New Orleans culture, the New Orleans theme. You're going to see opening night, which used to be called Media Day, the Monday or Tuesday of the week where everybody does the interviews. All the podiums and stuff on the field at the Superdome where the players are going to be doing their interviews, they're all New Orleans themed. So it's going to look like New Orleans shotgun houses, and everything's going to look very New Orleans. It's going to be cool. Maybe if you remember on the outside of the Superdome when Taylor Swift was here, they had the big friendship bracelet. Well, that's going to be some New Orleans theme. A display as well. All the around town on the street lights is going to have New Orleans theme type Super Bowl displays. You're going to know the Super Bowl's here. It's going to be large and in charge all week, and I just think it's really smart to lean into the culture here.
And again, buddy, we already knew this. One of the reasons why people want the Super Bowl so bad. But you're speaking to the world about the culture of New Orleans, man. You cannot put a price tag on that.
And here's the other thing. Think about this, Ricky. Obviously everyone wants the Saints to be in the Super Bowl here in New Orleans. That would be the greatest, story ever, right? But if it doesn't happen, it's shaping up to potentially be Detroit, Buffalo. That would be unbelievable. Detroit's never made the Super Bowl. They're coached by Dan Campbell, who is longtime Saints assistant. The city of Detroit would descend upon New Orleans like nothing we've ever seen if they make it. They've never even been their original franchise. And then Buffalo, of course, their history, 4 Super Bowls and never won one. They'd have a chance. So you have a unbelievable storyline no matter who wins it. Detroit making it and winning it, or Buffalo finally winning their first. Both cold weather cities, their fans would come down here, huge fan bases. And then if say Buffalo doesn't make it, Kansas City could potentially be going for a third straight. So there's some unbelievable storylines with this Super Bowl. It's shaping up to be kind of an epic game.
I had a conversation with Robbie Carter recently. He puts on big fishing tournaments in Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas. He's got one coming to Key West, Boston. Great conversation. But he talked about the people that come to these big fishing tournament events who aren't fishing. They just want to, the way he said it, they just want to be near it. They want to be, close to it. And so people will be coming from Detroit and Buffalo who don't have tickets to the game and don't plan to go to the game, just to be here, to be close to it. It's going to be wild.
Yeah, and it's shaping up well. I mean, we'll see. There's always upsets. We'll see. But Detroit looks like a juggernaut. They're going to have probably home field advantage in the NFC unless they stumble with Philadelphia right on their heels. And Buffalo's playing very well right now. It's shaping up as a pretty epic game. And I think the way the NFL's leaning into the, basically the city and the 11th, this is the 11th Super Bowl we've had, which is a record tying 11th Super Bowl. I just think it's going to be a really special one. Yeah. And they're excited about it, I can tell you as well.
I don't want to overdo it, but coming back to Sean Payton salting in the wounds.
Yeah.
But he did, man. He's worked magic with that roster. Don't they have the same kind of salary cap issues the Saints has? Don't they?
Well, yes and no. They have one major thing. I mean, Sean Payton walked away from Russell Wilson after 1 year, and that created a huge salary cap issue because it was such a massive contract. But that is what I love about Sean Payton. He's not afraid to make hard decisions, and you're going to bite the bullet for 1 year. That's why they had to hit on this draft class, because they had to have a bunch of young players that don't cost a lot of money because of their cap situation. They're in a 1 year bind, and they've already won 8 games. So the future is very bright in Denver. They have this incredible young team led by this rookie quarterback. And they're going to get out from under the cap issue in 1 year, and they're going to be able to add to that roster in a year that should have been a transition year, and they're ahead of schedule. And I think he's definitely a leading candidate for Coach of the Year in the NFL with what he's done with that roster. I pointed out on social media, I mean, it was projected as either the worst or second worst roster in the league by a number of outlets, not just one or two. I mean, a number of them. A lot of people had them picked to have the first pick in the draft. That's how bad they thought the team was going to be. I didn't think that. As you know, I was bullish on what they were going to do just because I knew Sean Payton can coach. That guy can coach, man. Whatever you want to say about him, he can coach, and we're seeing it right now in Denver.
Hey, so they keep a scorecard on players that come to NFL teams who, because of salary cap issues, have to leave and go be stars for other teams. I wonder how, if they did, maybe they do, how do the Saints rank in that regard? Because we've lost so many great players.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they had to make some tough decisions, especially on the defensive side of the ball, who they were going to pay, who they weren't going to pay. And, some of those decisions I think have backfired on them. Certainly the biggest one, Trey Hendrickson, who's last I checked was leading the NFL in sacks. And that's a huge area of concern for the Saints. They just don't have the pass rush. That was one that hurt, and they lost them to Cincinnati, not exactly a big market team that throws money around. I mean, that one hurts more than anything. But we just saw recently Zach Bond is up as a Pro Bowl candidate, and he was here last 5 years and really never dented the starting lineup. And he's having an all-star caliber season. Those decisions have certainly put a microscope on the front office and their decision making.
Well, it has to factor in, but listen, you and I both know this. Miss Benson pays very close attention to the Times Picayune and NOLA.com. So you can bet she read your column. There's literally no doubt in my mind, and there's no doubt in your mind.
Yeah, I'm sure she's aware. I mean, look, she's certainly aware that things aren't going well right now. I mean, they're not going well with the Pelicans. They're even worse with the Pelicans. It's pretty grim here, and it's probably even more grim on Airline Drive. This has been one of the worst sports seasons probably in the history of the franchise, with both teams really struggling.
Well, listen, when I went up to meet with Miss Benson and Tom Benson and Mickey Loomis and Dennis Lashaw, excuse me. Mickey pulled me aside afterwards, and we talked about, and you know this, we talked about how this is a great experiment for the Saints organization, because they're the same management team is managing two professional franchises, NBA and NFL. And It hasn't really gone so well, has it?
No, and look, I think that's an issue that they've got to consider. I mean, I know that they put a lot of resources into the Pelicans, a lot of money. They've invested heavily. For it to not have come to fruition in terms of results and wins and losses is a major disappointment. We're talking about changes with the Saints. I think there's going to be significant changes with the Pelicans, and starting with this year during the middle of the season, I think we're going to see a lot of big names traded. I think they're going to hit the reset button, but that could come with consequences to not only head coach Willie Green, but maybe even general manager David Griffin. I mean, there's a lot of pressure right now because it has not worked out with Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram and that core.
Yeah. Wow, that's so hard to see. And man, the New Orleans. Again, we got to remember it's the New Orleans market is the Gulf South. It's not the city limits of New Orleans.
Yep.
I told someone the other day that I'm a Saints fan to the end. I just am, and I want them to do well. Like we were coming back from the camp, watching the game. Coming back from the camp, my son Jordan said, "Dad, why are you even watching them?" I said, "Are you serious?" I mean, listen. The last conversation I had with my dad was about the Saints before he unexpectedly died. The Saints are near and dear to my heart, and that's true for just about thousands of people in the Gulf South, isn't it?
I always compare it. It reminds me a lot of like a Odessa Permian Texas high school football in a small town. The love, the passion for the team. It's really unusual. I think Green Bay, Wisconsin's the only thing I could compare it to. And you're right. It really is the conscience of the region when the Saints do well or when they don't do well. You know it.
Yeah, we really do. Jeff, thank you, man. Keep on being the honest, straightforward Debbie Downer in the room, because oftentimes you are right and you can turn a ship. And you need to in this case. So keep up the good work, my friend.
All right, Ricky. Thank you very much. And we'll talk next week, buddy.
You bet. We'll have Caleb Sellers when we come back on the other side from SuperTalk Mississippi News. We'll see you after this.